Jill Wagner has been a forester in Hawaii for 30 years. She started at the Amy Greenwell Ethnobotanical Garden as a horticulturalist for the garden where she grew native Hawaiian species. She received a bachelor's degree from the University of Hawaii in ethnobotany. She has been conducting forest restoration projects for the state of Hawaii, Department of Hawaiian Homelands, the Nature Conservancy, the National Park Service, and Kamehameha schools and other private landowners. She has trained people in ecosystems restoration and nursery management for decades. She started the Hawaii Island Seed Bank in 2008, which banks seeds for large landowners on Hawaii Island. It also serves as a model for small regional seed banks called seed arcs. She conducts training for people from all over the world so that they can save their native seeds and their food crop seeds. Seed arcs are off-grid solar-powered seed banks that are built to keep seeds in the hands of the people. And you can learn more about those from the Joseph Rock Arboretum, which we'll be talking about. Jill, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the Rainforest Cafe.
Hello, Dennis. Thank you so much for having me.
So it's so good to have you. I've looked forward to this for a long time. And I've been aware of your work, of course, for decades. You know, we have a long friendship, and I've always known of your dedication to ecosystem restoration, and particularly with respect to preservation of native Hawaiian species, and just in general, your commitment to saving the world's forests, or as much of them as possible, with a focus on Hawaii. So I was surprised somewhat, although not really, because it fits right in with what you've been doing. But I was not surprised. I was actually delighted to learn that you've now gotten into seed banks, which is a whole other area that is very important in the conservation, in the fight for conservation. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into this, and what are seed banks, and why are they important?
Yes, I started the Hawaii Island Seed Bank in 2008, and it was for a grant from Hawaii Wildfire Organization, and it helped. It was basically as a mitigation to have seeds for post wildfire restoration. And so that was 2008. That was way before this fire thing has really escalated. And now it's in the front of everybody's minds. But that enabled me to start collecting a lot of common native seeds. So I've done restoration of Hawaiian ecosystems, but collecting common native seeds and really bulking and amassing seeds has been a really, really good thing for Hawaii Island. And now we have millions of seeds. I've been training people for years, a lot of students, and I really want to leave the next generation with a lot of resources so they can have what they need to keep going and to support the land, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next 20 years. We don't know what's going to happen to plants in the ground, and we need to have, so when you do restoration in the ground and you do active forestry, that's called in situ preservation or conservation. When you do something that preserves biodiversity out of the field, that's called ex-situ conservation. So seed banking is one of the most important ex-situ conservation tools that we have, because you can store millions of seeds in a very small space in a refrigerator. So I was doing that for years, and I've been really, really you know, working more and more globally, and seeing that this is a model for people globally. So I bought 48 acres here in Kona, in 2020, and I started the Joseph Rock Arboretum. And the Arboretum houses our Hawaii Island Seed Bank. And so the Arboretum is a training site for new forest creators. And we work in the nursery, we work in the field, and in the seed bank. So it really gives people an understanding of the restoration cycle. And we go through the whole cycle. So I do that both in Hawaii and online. I have online courses, and I'm more and more working with people in the tropics, in Africa and in South America, and trying to really help people to save their native seeds.
The Joseph Rock Arboretum is kind of a Hawaiian institution, but you have kind of revived it, right? And you've been a force in rediscovering it and repurposing it to these conservation efforts. Is that right?
Well, Joseph Rock, of course, is the father of botany in Hawaii. He's in the Linnaean tradition. So he came to Hawaii in 1902 or 3 from Vienna. And he was an autodidact. He was a self taught botanist. And, in those times there were no cars. He went like everybody on horseback throughout the Hawaiian Islands. And he wrote monographs of individual plant species. So he studied Hawaiian plants, and he really increased the knowledge base on these native species. But the other thing, he did a couple of really important things. One of them is in his book, Indigenous Trees of Hawaii, he described ecosystems. And this is early 1900s. That term ecosystem was coined, I think it was by Hirschberger. It was like 1885. It's not that old. And he described in his book ecosystem. So he described the community of species that grew together. And the second thing he did that was really important, I believe, is that he took photographs of the native plants. And again, if you think about photography, that started in the late 1800s. And he took really good photographs. And on this Joseph Rock Arboretum website, you can see some of the photographs because the book is out of print and I wanted to share it with people. And for people like me, people doing forestry on the ground, that book is like the Bible of Hawaiian botany. It is the first book that really describes ecosystems of all the Hawaiian Islands, shows photographs of these plants and their stature in full maturity, which is really amazing today because some of these plants are very, very rare now. And so Rock's favorite place in all of the Hawaiian Islands was Kona. And he loved the dry forest ecosystem. And he went to Puvawa, which is a historic ranch here, and he wrote part of his book there. So one of my colleagues, um, Paul Weissig, he was the director of the Honolulu Botanical Gardens that comprised 7 gardens on Oahu, and he was the director for 20 years. But he was a good friend of Rock, and he became Rock's executor of his estate when Rock died. Rock was never married, and I asked permission from Mr. Weissig if I could name this arboretum after Rock to honor him, and he said that Rock would love that. And so this is really honoring the people that have come before and built on the knowledge base that I use today very much, and making sure we don't forget about their work. So that this place is a place for teaching and learning, and we have really, really good programs here. But one of them is global. It's a model for a global way of working with your regional seeds and doing forestry. So for seed banking, those protocols for banking seeds are universal. They're international standards that has been developed, and the seeds are what are regional. So I teach people all over the world about how to take care of their seeds so their seeds can be stored for decades or 100 years. If you don't do that, we can talk about that more, but if you don't do that, the seeds will degrade. And obviously, seeds are living things and they age. They have an aging process. Some seeds age faster and some seeds age slower, but you have to properly handle them so they can be stored. And that's what I do and teach.
But, as a lot of people, as you and I know, it's often, but a lot of other people don't know, tropical seeds are often difficult to preserve their viability. So that's a problem with collecting seeds in the tropics. By the time you get them to a safe place where they can be stored, they're not viable. Have you had to develop techniques that are specific for these fragilely viable tropical seeds?
Well, there's a few things in regards to that. One thing is that when I started doing forestry in Hawaii, there were no seed banks in Hawaii. So when it started, people thought that most seeds were recalcitrant. Most tropical seeds are recalcitrant. There's basically three different classifications of seeds. One is orthodox. Orthodox means that seeds can be dried, they can be desiccated and stored. They can be put in like hibernation, stored for decades or hundreds of years. Then you intermediate seeds, seeds that maybe can be stored for a few years, a short period, and then they die. And then you have recalcitrant seeds, seeds that are like a mango seed or an avocado seeds. Those seeds are wet seeds and they can't be banked, they can't be stored. So those plants are more vulnerable because you don't have that ex-situ way of conserving them that I explained earlier. So very common for people to think that tropical seeds are not they're not store they can't store well, but as research has been done on seed banking, this is very, very new, that those a lot of the seeds that people thought were recalcitrant are actually orthodox. And so that the sort of the knowledge base is shifting and certainly has in Hawaii. And I've talked to people for example, Australia, who think that most of their seeds are not, they can't store. But it's not that. There was a paper that just came out last year saying that maybe 75% of their flora can be is orthodox. So I think that as we learn, as we do research, and the two largest seed banks in the world are the Millennium Seed Bank in England, and they bank native seeds. And then there's the food crop seeds in Norway, and that's called the Global Seed Vault. So those institutions also do, especially the Millennium Seed Bank, they do research on the seeds and they publish research on what the storage capacity is. And for small seed banks like me, I study that so I can see what I can do with different families or genus. It really helps me to understand how I can take care of the seeds.
Okay, so this Millennium Seed Project, is that affiliated with the Eden Project? Is that part of Q, or what's the institutional affiliation of that?
It's Q. It's
Q,
affiliated with Q, right?
right.
And it's housed at one of the Kew Gardens, and it is a really I've worked with them, and they've done some really great stuff. And the other one that has come out of that is Botanic Gardens Conservation International, BGCI, and they put out a paper in 2021 that's called "The State of the World's Trees." And that paper, the bottom line of that paper is that one in every three trees today is at risk of extinction. We're really in a serious place in history and time, and we need to collect and save seeds, regionally all over the world. And so I've got a big vision, and my vision, I'm trying to raise $2.5 million now to build 10 seed banks, and I'll tell you how I'm doing it, and it's different. It's not the big institution. Those big institutions cost about $20 million to set them up and fund them. They were funded and built in 1989. This is very new. And my vision is to have small seed banks all over the world instead of having centralized seed banks. I think that we should have regional seed banks all over the world. So what's happened is that I bought this property in Hawaii to develop the arboretum, and I was living in a 40-foot shipping container. And my carpenter, he built me a little cabin, and I was working on my seeds in that cabin, and my whole living room was taken up with the seed tables and seeds. And then I thought, I can build a seed bank out of a 40-foot shipping container. So I built a seed bank, and it's solar powered, and that's what the Hawaii Island Seed Bank is housed in. It's completely off grid. It has a generator for a backup, but it really is fully functional as a solar powered seed bank. And it's an incredible thing because it's a metal box. And the two main things that you need to do when you bank seeds is you need to control the temperature and the relative humidity. If you get that right, you can store seeds for a long, long time. So because this is a metal box, I realized that I can start drying and processing millions of seeds, and we do. It's amazing how much seed we can save. So my vision is to build these seed banks and ship them all over the world and help people. I have already right now I have a list of 10 projects in Africa that are really ready, and they want to bank seeds, and they want to bank both native seeds and food crop seeds for food security. And it's very, very important. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, that's fantastic. I mean, this idea makes so much more sense than trying to create these centralized seed banks, which are important, but they require enormous infrastructure and millions of dollars. You're trying to find about $2 million to deploy these seed arcs, I think you call them, in various parts of the world. And that's something that each one doesn't have to be that expensive. And it's also something that the local communities can get involved in. They can, they can find a lot of the resources to do this. This just makes so much sense to take this concept and replicate it throughout the world. This is really cutting edge stuff, Jill, in my opinion. I mean, I'm not an expert, but I know the importance of biodiversity. And I like that your focus here with these seed banks is pretty much very much emphasizes biodiversity. It's
Yes.
important to preserve food plants and useful plants, but at the end of the day, all plants are useful, right? And the biodiversity is as much a threat to the loss of biodiversity is as much a threat as the decimation of these different environments due to climate change. So this is a very forward-looking, future-oriented kind of project that you've got. And your is the Joseph Rock Arboretum that you founded, essentially. You created this organization. So is it a nonprofit?
Yes.
And
Yes.
people can support it and get tax deductions and all that?
That's right. And that's what I'm trying to do because the people who want these seed banks, I've trained them. I develop long-term relationships. I've trained them. I have online courses, and I've worked with them for at least a year or 2 years, and I know they have, nonprofits set up, they've got teams, they've got all of the infrastructure and ready to take. They've got the land, they can show me that they have the land secure, documents to show that they can put a seed bank. So what I have found is that they don't have access to the money like we have in the West. It's much easier to raise money in the West than it is in the developing world. And so I'm trying to create a bridge because the native people, indigenous people, this has been written, this is documented, are they are really the caretakers of biodiversity on this planet. And we have to leave seed in the hands of the people. It can't go to if we had a catastrophe, would they get the seed? I mean, you've got to it's gotta stay where it's from,
But
do you
it
know?
has to be decentralized, and it has to uh, be the seeds from the environment where these people live. So if there is a catastrophe, God forbid, they'll at least have the genetic resources to try to reconstruct it or preserve. So how much does it cost to build and deploy one of these seed arcs? Have you, uh, I mean, you have one at the Arboretum, you have one
Yeah.
or two in Hawaii?
Yes, yes, I've built them and it costs about 250,000. So as opposed to $20 million, with 2.5 million, I can make 10 of them. And that's including shipping and customs and complete building, the solar system, training. I go in country, I do a 2-week training program and I teach, so there's institutional knowledge. I teach more than one person, a group of people, and it is really, really valuable. And what happens is these people start scheming about creating microeconomies
Yeah,
because
I'm
once
sure.
yeah, they do, because what happened, I did a training in Tanzania, and once they start amassing seeds, then they can start growing plants in their nursery, and they can start selling plants, and they're like, "Hey, whoa, now I can sell native plants for restoration projects. Now I can sell food seeds or food crops and start, medicinal plants and start creating these little local economies. It's very, very good. I'm so pleased that people are doing that, they're thinking, they're like, we want to do this, and it's great.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. It's very bottom up. I mean, this is the people utilizing their resources. It generates enthusiasm. They understand the value of it. I mean, it's just a fantastic concept and clearly makes much more sense. I mean, you still need these centralized seed banks, there's nothing wrong with those, but they don't get the seeds out to the people. And under the model you've created, the people have the seeds, they have the environment, they just need the facilities to preserve these things through time and keep the viability. So it's such a have you had success getting funding? How many of these arcs have you deployed around the world?
What happened is I joined with some corporates. I joined with some, corporate. Um, I got a job working with companies that really understood what I was doing, and I tried it. But the problem is, it just doesn't provide enough ROI, and I'm not interested as much as on return on investment. I'm trying to help people be secure in for the future, and I'm very, very concerned. I just want to give you a couple of statistics. One is, according to the World Wildlife Foundation, 75% of the world's tropical forests that existed 55 years ago have been destroyed or severely degraded. We're losing massive, but people don't realize how massive in our lifetime the biodiversity that we're losing. Secondly, this is another big one. The United Nations is estimating now extreme fires could rise by 50% by the end of the century. See, the problem with all of these climate impacts, we've got flooding, fires, droughts, you know, all of these severe climate events that happen, what people never link is that not only you lose biodiversity, you lose the mother trees and those genetics of those standing trees, but also what it really does that's very critical is it really hinders pollination. And when you have pollination disruption, when you have forest health issues, physiological stress on the floral resources, the flowers can't be made, nectar production or pollen is affected, you won't be able to get seeds. So we have to get seeds now. This is something that we really, and I'm so trying to push this forward because I wasn't able to do it through the corporate world, but I want to do it. I do think that people will understand and do understand. And I made a shift this year and I'm going to try to do it and try to find money and raise money in the philanthropic world because these seed banks are not, they don't take that much time to build. They take a couple of months and you ship them out and then you start training and you empower people. The other thing that I wanted to say, this is huge, is that the keepers of seeds are traditionally women. And this in the global in the developing world is very, very important to empower women and to give them meaningful jobs that they can do that are going to support their communities. And I have really cool, and it's on the website because I've got some recipients who want seed banks on the Joseph Rock Arboretum. I put a seed arc recipients so people can see there's people ready to do this work. What they're doing is they're collecting seeds, but seeds age. They need to have this it's not hard science. It's simple, but you got to do the protocols. You've got to do it properly and you can suspend that and they won't die.
Well, that's fantastic. So it seems like as a philanthropic investment, this ticks all the boxes, you know? I mean, I would think philanthropists and people with ecosystem awareness and awareness of the challenges that the environment faces on local and global scales would understand because this is simple. There's no new technologies that need to be developed. It's a people's effort. It's bottom up, powered by women, powered by the local community, and it's preserving these local species that are so important to the well-being, not only the food, but everything else they get from, I mean, the whole non-timber forest products, uh, range of things, as you know, very well, better than I do, certainly, but there have been, uh, various studies done about what is the value of a typical 50 hectares of Amazonian rainforest? Depending on how it's utilized, and if you just cut it down and put in cattle and take the timber out of it, it has a certain value. If you keep it intact, you preserve that complexity and the value is like 10 to 20 times, and you can keep harvesting, you don't deplete it.
That's
That's
right.
the incredible thing. We're so slow to come to these realizations, to wake up to this, but this is absolutely fantastic, work that you're doing, and I hope that you are getting, a lot of support, and I wanna do everything I'm hoping this podcast may help. So people can contact you through the website, through the Joseph Rock website?
Yes, that's right. And then, there's two ways they can help. One is by providing smaller donations for training, because that training helps me to see who you've got to have good people on the ground. So who in the different regions can do the work. I can train them so they get to a professional level. And then they can be recipients for these seed arcs and people with more more substantial donations can help build these seed arcs. But I think that the people who will support this will be part of this incredible, this could create a huge sea change in terms of floral biodiversity preservation. And I'm really, really excited about it. And I wanted to, you made me think of something else I want to talk about. Um, and I'm so glad you brought up the Amazon and looking at, existing for, because of course we need to save the existing forest more than anything. That's where the real carbon sequestration happens. But um, I have talked to numerous projects. I mean, at least over 50 projects in the last few years, maybe 100, a lot. And what I have found is the largest tree planting organizations in the world are planting 1 to 5 species. That's what's going on. And I took last year, I went online, I researched Vera and Gold Standard, the carbon sequestration registration bodies, and I looked at all the projects that are registered. Many, many, many of these projects are timber projects. So what they do is they plant a fast-growing timber, they register it for carbon sequestration. Let's say one of the most popular one in the world is eucalyptus. They plant eucalyptus, they get the big carbon sequestration in the first 10 years, and then they cut the trees down. What does that do for habitats, for animals and insects, for biodiversity, for runoff, for soil building?
It's a very narrow focus on this one thing that grow these fast growing species. They completely seem blind or unaware of the biodiversity issues of the other. Yeah, I mean, I mean, these are people with good hearts, good intentions, but not much knowledge of how you actually support this, how you actually make it viable, not for the next 10 years, but for the next 100 years, hopefully the next 1,000 years. You I don't know if you've read Wade Davis's latest book. It's an amazing book. It's a series of essays. It's called Beneath the Surface of Things. He has one of the most interesting essays I've ever read on the current environmental crisis, global crisis, and a point that he makes in that in that in that article that he wrote. It's a series of essays. The point that he makes in that is that, there's all this interest, all these people are talking about developing these super high tech technologies for, carbon sequestration, for taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and sequestering it into minerals and that sort of thing. And there are like multi-billion dollar projects. They're basically usually run by tech people from Silicon Valley. It's basically it's completely misunderstanding the problem. I mean, and these are people who, their orientation is capitalism. They want to make money and they want to leverage the available funds for this kind of thing toward these ridiculous carbon sequestration technologies. But a tree is the most sophisticated carbon sequestration technology that exists. And it
Oh,
doesn't require any research and development or no, I mean, it just works. And the more trees you can plant, the better off you are. And what you need infrastructure in the sense that you need a place to plant these trees. But an interesting point he made in that article, among many others, was if you could plant 1 trillion trees, it would reduce carbon emissions. It would sequester 35% of the global carbon emissions. So, and what would it cost? It would cost about 30 cents a tree. So that's less than, so $300 billion. That's peanuts. That's than the typical defense budget of the United States for a single year. So, but it's not sexy, like carbon sequestration technology is and building these machines and all that. I mean, that's all very sexy, and the tech people are preoccupied with, how cool this is, but it won't work.
I mean, I'm so glad you brought that up because that is really, really important. And I think, I think that we need to do everything we can. But I just came back from the oldest forestry conference in the world. It's called IUFRO, and it only happens once every 5 years. And it blew my mind. It was all scientists, and it's the one of the keynote speakers was an atmospheric scientist, and he this is what he said, Dennis, exactly what you just said. He said, "Here, let me tell you something." He said, "Trees have been developing carbon sequestration for 500 million years. Do not, do not think you're going to come up with something better." And
Uh,
I'm, oh,
yeah, so they need to see that lecture or whatever because they tend to be, preoccupied with technology. And it's like, oh, there's a technological solution, to mitigate climate change. And that's true. But like you say, the technology has existed for centuries, and it is basically forestry. It's basically creating systems that are integrated, highly biodiverse systems in which trees, because of their ability to, they're super carbon accumulators, need to play a big part in these ecosystems, whether they're engineered ecosystems or natural ecosystems that are augmented. I mean, it's so dismaying, like in Canada here, every summer, I mean, the boreal forests of Canada, are hundreds of thousands of acres. Every summer, a good deal of them, a large amount of them are just on fire, you know? And because there's no way to prevent it, because everything's heating up, and these systems are drying out. But this is the loss. I mean, this is this existing pool of captured carbon, sequestered carbon in the form of the trees, and we're re-releasing it back into the atmosphere, not on purpose in the case of the boreal forest. Of course, in the case of the Amazon, the harvesting of timber and the release of carbon from the existing timber in the Amazon is very often deliberate because it reflects this completely short-sighted understanding about the value of the forests and how you utilize them to maximize the value and maximize their sustainability at the same time. And in your case, I mean, I don't know anything about this other than what I read, but that's what I understand it to be. I mean, if they could step back from their fetish about technology and
yeah.
realize if you're going to put $1 billion toward carbon sequestration, grow trees, fund these kinds of exactly the kinds of things that you're trying to do. That
Well,
that you're
yeah.
trying to do, that you are doing, but imagine what you could do with $1 billion.
200 million, I can build 100 seed banks all over the world, and it would change history because it would allow people to secure their own resiliency. And I mean, this is very critical. I do want to thank Dr. Joachim Schnellenhuber, who said that atmospheric scientist, because I think he blew everybody. It was like a could drop when he said that, and everybody knows it in that world because these are all forestry people. But it really made the point very succinct. So I was grateful for that because I it helps me to convey that to other people. But there's also, you said something else, Dennis. You talked about them people that are doing either monocultures um, or really sort of simple projects without using native species and stuff, there we're also losing systems. And I thought about, I'm reading a book called Gaia Psyche, and it's environment. It's Andrew Fellows. Anyway, he's got a there about Dana Meadows, who's a systems scientist, who was a systems scientist. And I think that what we forget, even people like me, foresters who do ecosystems restoration, is that systems are very complex, and we can't even no matter how in depth we go, systems are basically cannot be fully replicated. We lose things when we destroy systems, and there's an intangibility about systems, and also there's exotic behavior of systems. And but the thing about systems is they're self-organizing, and they build resilience over time. And this is really critical for all life. And so when we're busting up and killing all these systems, and then we say, oh, we're going to plant some tree, and as it's not, it's really misunderstanding a lot of loss, a lot of loss.
As though that made up for it, just planting trees. But this is what I mean. They have no sense of the systems dynamics of this whole thing. It's much more than trees. The trees are central to it, but everything that depends on the trees, the animals that live there, the fungi in the ground, the other plants that are associated with them, and I mean, you and I are more accustomed to thinking about in these terms. Certainly you are, knowing we understand that ecosystems are complex and they can't be synthesized, they can only be
Right.
sure. I mean, botanical gardens are a good example, but botanical gardens are wonderful. I don't want to say anything bad about botanical gardens. Their attempts to bring a lot of species together and cultivate them, but in no way are they an ecosystem you would find in nature. I mean, they have their virtues. Botanical gardens and seed banks, it seems to me, go hand in hand, and to a certain extent, herbaria. The Botanic Academy's been working on a project to restore this herbarium in Iquitos, and I've spent 50 years working with the curator of that herbarium. But in some ways, this seed project, I mean, I don't want to divert funding away from my herbarium project, but we're not getting much funding for it anyway. So I can say this. I think as an investment for people that want to see, people of a philanthropic bent who want to see their investment really pay off in the future, far beyond their lifetimes. The seed is a good bet. It's a good bet. And it's I mean, there's nothing bad that can be said about it, and everything is good about it.
That's right. And it provides, that's one of the things that I'm trying to develop in my pitch. It provides real metrics. You can if somebody supports a building of a seed bank, you can provide them with annual numbers of species saved, numbers of food crops saved, numbers of native species. The whole seed bank, how much has it saved? How many jobs has it created? How many women led um, you know,
Right.
project.
It's
It's
all very quantifiable.
That's right, and that's what I think will be attractive.
Like that. It's like question is, where is my money going? You can answer those questions in great detail. I think it's an amazing project of my and the good thing is you're not alone. There is a community of people worldwide that recognize this, but you're a pioneer, and certainly in Hawaii, you're a pioneer of this.
I'm trying to sort of use the Hawaii model to replicate, and there are, there's a great book by Martin Pretchell called the I think it's called the Seeds of Cuchamaquec. or the unlikely piece of Cuchamaquik. And what he talks about is being in Central America, being in Guatemala in the 1970s. There was a massive earthquake, and this earthquake flattened this region, and it killed a lot of people. And then people were trying to rebuild, and he survived. He was not in a building or whatever, and he survived. And what happened was after that, there became all this violence and sort of terror and lack of chaos and lack of, leadership and the people who survived, the people who survived were the people with seeds. Because if you have seeds, you have a way food crop seeds grow quickly. You have a way to grow something and to have food to eat. And this had such an impact on me. I thought, if in the worst case scenario, when you have seeds, that's your gold. That is your real security. And a lot of people are thinking about that today. They're growing their own food and all of that. And this just ups the game because you can store millions of seeds, And so I really think it's important.
Seeds are better than gold in terms of their actual value. I mean, you can trade gold, but you can't eat gold, you know? So definitely seeds have a value. The gentleman that gave the talk that impressed you so much at this conference, can you send us a link to that we can post? Is it online somewhere?
Try to see if I can find that. He was brilliant, and everything he said was like I wanted to capture. And absolutely, I'll try to find that because he is. You know what he said? He said I've been in 5 countries in 5 days. I've been talking to politicians, to kings, and now I'm here and I'm talking to you. And scientists are not. They don't beat around the bush. The media is very. They don't. Sometimes they're very dramatic and sometimes they don't say the right thing or they water it down. Scientists are like, this is what's happening. Boom. And it's very different. So it's a real call to action. But you said one other thing that I wanted to say because I think it's important. You keep triggering thoughts in me. Thank you so much. Um, um, you talked about botanical gardens and seed banks, and I wanted to say that now the global strategy for plant conservation has named 2 ex-situ sources of biodiversity preservation, and that is botanical gardens and seed banks. So, botanical gardens are starting to shift and think about how they can support maybe by planting more natives and not being sort of a museum for any tropical thing.
Mhm.
And like the Joseph Rock Arboretum is really focusing on rare native Hawaiian plants and really working with the state and the plant extinction prevention program and my good colleagues that are trying to do this and trying to create a safe haven for these plants at this garden. So that's one thing. But seed banks are huge because they can store a massive amount of seeds. So I was glad you said that because that's actually the global strategy for plant conservation now. They're listed, those 2. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think botanical gardens are their own understanding of their mission is changing, in very good directions because like you say, they used to be museums for plants and people they would send explorers all over the world and bring all these plants back. This was very much the Victorian model as basically biopiracy. I mean, you're stealing these plants from these environments and you're bringing them back to a place where, yes, they can be preserved and grown, but the focus should be on creating botanical gardens that are rich in local species, and this is happening more and more. I mean, it's interesting what's happening in the whole in this whole field of museum science, and I think that botanical gardens are really part of this. It used to be, and the perspective was, we're the top civilization, we're the dominant civilization. These are the treasures that we've plundered from different parts of the world and brought to our museums, our botanical gardens, our institutions, and then, and aren't we wonderful for doing that? Yes, in some ways, it's good that somebody's doing that, but that's, but there's a, so then what? What do you do with that? It's better to have these institutions, as you say, like the institutions that can support these seed banks, if they work with these decentralized small installations like you're talking about, it will be much more effective. And people, instead of the people having to feel like, well, we have this botanical diversity, this biodiversity in these rich species, you know, but, the biopirates came along and took all that, and they never bothered even to say, "Thanks very much," So, and that's changing a little bit, and that's a good thing. I mean, if you think of, I mean, a again, if you think of the 5 or 10 major food crops in the world that sustain the world's food supply, these were all indigenous cultivars at some point.
That's
Yeah.
right.
And then they became global and they became like capitalist plants. But the origins of them was the knowledge of indigenous people, and that persists. I mean, when I look ahead at the challenges that face our world, and it seems hard to see how we're going to avert some very bad things. And most of it's going to happen after I'm long gone, probably after you're long gone, although you're much younger, but most of that's going to happen, after. But if you can, if these local communities can understand the value of what they have and learn how to share this knowledge and share the seeds and share the resources, they're going to be doing all right. I mean, I think communities at the northern tip of Vancouver Island, they won't even notice much when the apocalypse comes because they'll just be in their communities and doing what they can, growing what they can, and they don't depend on the internet and these kinds of things like the rest of us do. We've become much too addicted to our technology and more estranged from the natural world, and it's the natural world that sustains us. And that's what is so beautiful about what the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. I totally agree with you. We're so in alignment, and I really think that we need to build our own, self-sufficiency and good health for the mother, for the earth, and for all the children. So definitely we have to keep, pushing this and see as far as we can go to do something that's life affirming. I want to say yes to the future, and I want to do something that's life affirming. So
Yeah. Well, better than the alternative, but, I mean, it's possible to, I think there are solutions, but we have to, as I've been saying for a long time, we have to wise up. We have to get wise about the choices that we make, and that requires thoughtfulness. We have to wake up and we have to wise up, and if we wise up, then we can begin to make intelligent choices, but I mean, we could spend another 2 hours complaining about political systems and governmental systems and basically run by idiots who don't really have any understanding of the complexities of what they're trying to deal with. So the answers tend to be very shallow, like this idea about the carbon sequestration technologies. trees have learned how to do this long before we were on this planet. And so we need to listen to the trees, listen to the forest. And yeah,
Dennis, I wanted to say, again, you reminded me of another thing that at that conference that several very high level people said, and they said that the current political systems are not are not capable of serving planetary governance. You cannot have 4-year cycles and destroy anything that is put in place and have care of the planet. And a lot of these scientists have said this from early, when we realized that we were in trouble in the 70s, and they threw out ecocide from the Rome Statute. They developed that, and all the countries that joined that, that international law, crimes against women, crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity, and they threw out ecocide, crimes against nature. And you can be a corporation or an individual, and you can harm the planet and know it and do it anyway. That should be absolutely against the law anywhere in the world. And that's what a lot of people are trying to shift that because we're destroying ourselves. And so, thank you for bringing that up too, because that's the way that I can sort of relate to the political systems. They cannot function properly to really serve uh planetary governance and the long-term care of all life. So
yeah,
that
this is one of the big challenges. None of the governmental regulatory approaches really work. And yeah, we have to have people that are enlightened enough to realize that and change things, and there's a certain, I think, fetishism about technology. I mean, and I like technology. We all like technology, but all this idea that, well, it's okay. We can despoil the earth. We can ravage the earth. We're all going to escape to Mars or something.
Well,
Not gonna happen, nor should it happen, and it won't happen, but so much effort is directed toward this idea. I mean, somebody like Elon Musk, I think, is so, at the end of the day, destructive of the world, and but we can get off on that as well. But he's not he's a visionary, but his vision is wrong, and he completely misunderstands. We need people more like you and people like Tom Lovejoy and this person that addressed the conference. We need people that really have that perspective. So maybe there's hope. I mean, it's a slow process, but it can make a difference over time, and maybe the shift is happening. Do you get the feeling that it is? I mean, you think 20 years from now, you'll be able to look back and say, yeah, we did a good job. And
I don't know about that. I feel like we're on a sort of it's larger. It's larger than human. We think we're in control, but we're not. So that's the problem with the systems, disrupting systems. But I do think that there are things that we can do that will really help future generations to to not suffer as much and to have a livable planet. This is so precious, and it's precious because of all of the biodiversity, and we need to really, that's number 1. And so, please, anybody out there, let's help. Let's help everybody and try to care for our mother and keep so we can look back in 20 years and say that we've done the best we can, and we've set something very good up. So let's do that.
these plants, especially, I think the psychedelic plants are catalysts for these kinds of realizations. I mean, the central message that I get from ayahuasca pretty much every time is, "You monkeys only think you're running the show." You know, that's the central message. We are monkeys and we're not running the show, and we have to get humble and we have to learn how to listen to nature and work with nature. And so, the people that like you that are doing this, I mean, you should just have a little halo over your head, although I know I know you because I know you're a humble person, and that's part of it too, is to always remember our limitations in terms of what we think we know. Arrogance has no place in this endeavor. So learning, listening, appreciating other people and other species, that's the way to go. So, uh well, we're just over an hour. Anything we didn't say that we should have?
Well, I'm so grateful, Dennis, to for you giving me this opportunity and to talk to you. And you and I always have excellent conversations, and so it gave us a chance to do that and to share it. And I'm so glad. And I think we covered a lot of things. I was worried we wouldn't have enough time, but I think we covered a lot of things. And hopefully we can talk again at some point. And
Absolutely. You can come back next year or whenever it seems appropriate and tell us about your project and what's happened, because it's a great thing, and I think you're going to have a lot of success. And to the extent that getting this podcast out there will help, we're going to spread this far and wide. So that's it. So okay, very good to talk with you.